I know that we're supposed to hate Mr. Collins, but honestly, I think he est so pathetic that it est impossible not to feel some kind of way about him. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a character study on one of my favorite literary villains, Mr. Collins from Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Let's get started. In order to do this character study, we will be analyzing Mr. Collins through the lens of one of my favorite literary analysis tools, which is the villain origin story. This is where we look at the background of a character and their childhood in order to better understand why they make the choices that they make and how they treat other people. So let's take a look at what we know about Mr. Collins's childhood. Mr. Collins is the cousin of Charlotte Lucas, who, if you've watched our previous videos on Pride and Prejudice, you all know that she is one of the more down-to-earth characters and is a close friend to Elizabeth. We first meet Mr. Collins when he comes to visit Longbourn, the home of the Bennets, in order to choose a wife. His family is wealthy, or at least has connections to wealth, and his mother is very much alive. So, based on what we know about the time period, this means that he was probably an only child. At the time, the Church of England frowned upon things such as birth control, which meant that most families were pretty large. It also meant that primogeniture was a big deal, because it determined who would inherit all of the land and titles. Now, for those of us unfamiliar with primogeniture, that's a big word for a really simple concept. In short, it just means that the eldest son inherited everything from his father. That meant that if there were no sons, then titles and land would pass to the next closest relative, usually a daughter. In Mr. Collins's case, his father had no sons, but he did have a younger brother, who we assume was content to live a life without any particular ambition. This meant that the younger brother could marry whomever he wanted, and he did. He married a woman named Mrs. Gardiner, which meant that Mr. Collins would become wealthy upon his father's death. So even though Mr. Collins came from a family with wealth, it was unguaranteed to him like it would have been if his father had been an older brother. Now, when I talk about the importance of knowing these details about Mr. Collins, it might seem like I'm trying to make excuses for him. But the truth is, I'm actually just trying to understand him better. The thing is that Mr. Collins was born into a life where he never had to worry about money. He was probably doted on by his parents, especially his mother, because he was an only child. And if his father had been a man who believed in primogeniture, then he was likely used to being seen as the head of the household, as the man in charge. All of this is to say that Mr. Collins grew up with a sense of entitlement. But I don't think that that automatically makes him a bad person. The problem starts when we add another layer to his story. You see, the life of a clergyman was not considered to be a prestigious one in the early 1800s. It was expected that the higher offices in the church would be reserved for those of noble birth. In fact, most clergymen lived very humble lives. So while Mr. Collins was wealthy, he still faced the reality of being looked down upon by many members of society. I think that this caused him to be incredibly insecure about his status. And his insecurity manifested itself in a few different ways. First, he is very concerned with the opinions of others and spends a lot of time worrying about what people think of him. Second, he is very anxious about his future and wants to make sure that he is taken care of no matter what happens. And third, and perhaps most importantly, he tries to curry favor with wealthy and powerful people in order to get ahead. When we look at the events of the novel from this angle, Mr. Collins's behavior suddenly makes a lot more sense. For example, his initial proposal to Elizabeth, while humiliating and degrading, was really just a way for him to secure himself a wealthy wife. He wasn't actually in love with her, but he knew that marrying her would give him access to the Bennet family's money. In fact, I think that he was willing to marry anyone who would boost his social status. Later in the story, he does end up marrying Charlotte Lucas. But again, I don't think that he actually loves her. Instead, he sees her as a way to improve his economic and social situation. She's younger than him, has little to no prospects of marriage, and would likely accept his proposal, which is exactly what happens. Another interesting way to look at Mr. Collins is through the lens of the father-daughter relationship. Remember that according to the rules of the church, Mr. Collins is essentially the spiritual father of the Bennet girls. As their pastor, it is his job to look out for them and make sure that they are taken care of. And he takes this responsibility very seriously. However, he completely misses the mark on what the Bennet girls actually need. He fails to recognize their individual personalities and instead tries to force them into marriages that would benefit him. In particular, he's fixated on the idea of Elizabeth marrying him or one of his friends, and he's completely blindsided when she refuses his proposal. I think that this is because he genuinely believes that he is doing right by her. He thinks that he is offering her a chance at happiness by proposing to her, even though he has no interest in actually marrying her himself. He's too self-absorbed and socially anxious to realize that Elizabeth would be miserable if she were to agree to marry him. In the end, Mr. Collins is not a sympathetic character. He's awkward and classis. But I think that looking at his story helps us to understand why he is the way that he is. He is a product of his environment, a man who grew up with a sense of entitlement, but was constantly reminded that he was lower on the rungs of society than he would have liked. His anxiety about his future and his desire to be respected and admired by others ultimately lead to his downfall. So now I want to turn it over to you. What do you think? Does this analysis of Mr. Collins help you to like him a little bit more? Or maybe you hate him even more now that you know about his sad childhood? Either way, let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, please do you forget to hit that subscribe button so that you can join us for more videos in the future. I'll see you next time. Bye!